The Michael Peterson story is getting popular again. That's because of his story being on HBO Max. So we've put together sort of a 4 lies and 1 truth. So you'll have a better idea of what he looks like when he's being dishonest, and then you'll know what he looks like when he's being honest. As well, you'll be able to compare the actor who's playing Michael Peterson and his body language to the real Michael Peterson and his body language. So here we go.
Well, you got his statement.
Mm-hmm.
What'd he say?
Said you had sex with him.
Oh, you're shitting me.
4 or 5 times.
Where?
I don't know all the details because I was skimming through all the stuff. And when I came to his...
You're kidding me.
That's what he's claiming. That's what he's claiming.
Oh my God.
Everybody wants a piece of you.
Jesus Christ.
Or everybody claims to have a piece of you. One of the two.
And you have his statement?
Yeah, we copied it.
Send me a copy of that statement. I'm dying to see that.
I'll get it tomorrow.
Was it a short statement, a long statement?
About a page and a half.
Okay.
Handwritten.
Handwritten, okay. He didn't indicate where this great love affair took place?
Yeah, but Mike, I cannot remember it. So. Rather know now than later.
I'll say. God, I'll say for sure.
So I talked to Dave about Dennis, and we're going to rethink. We're going to digest the statements and then rethink as to how to approach it.
Okay. All right. Jesus. All right.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
So these movements you see in the beginning of the video, this is what I would call something like target lock. There's a potential threat or threatening information, and he is monitoring it as closely as possible. You can see him tracking the other person here, which I think is his attorney, to make sure he gets as much data as possible before anything happens so he can react to the amount of data or react to what's coming out. There's an immediate rise in vocal pitch.
Where? You're kidding me.
Which we teach, anybody that teaches deception detection, which doesn't technically exist. We're looking at stress. Anybody that teaches deception detection will talk about this rising vocal pitch thing. I've never seen it outside of a Dennis the Menace episode. I haven't seen it this great of a deviation from baseline. So this is a great rise in vocal pitch example.
Yes.
And as he's being told, before the whole thing comes out, he's doing what's called the transderivational search, where his eyes are moving back and forth to pull up as many programs that he might need to deal with this as possible. So did I park outside? Was I at a hotel? Did I leave DNA somewhere? Going through as many possible scenarios as he can. And I'm going to leave some of the behavior stuff, but when guilty people are being presented with verbal evidence, they will tend to look away to process what their response is going to be. Innocent people, when presented with verbal evidence or something bad that happened verbally, they're going to lock right on. And they want to know everything that you know. But when guilty people are more likely to look away, according to me, when they're hearing some stuff that's bad. And this face, while shaking his head, is a mirror image at the very end when he's kind of, his lips go together. This is a mirror image of Anthony Weiner and a lot of other people who had kind of got called out before the denials took place. And the reason the denial did not take place right here is that the person doesn't know how much information you've got. That's why you don't see a denial. They want to collect a bunch of data from you before they make a denial. All right, Greg?
Yeah, so this guy is a storyteller, and you'll see him throughout these other videos telling stories, a lot of detail, those kinds of things. A couple of things you notice here, he is forced into what I'd refer to as a death spiral of a lie. In the True Crime Workshop, we talk about that. We talk the liar's loop. There has to be a trigger, then you fabricate your information, then you deconflict it in your head, then you pitch it, then you defend it, and that puts you back into deconflict, into the pitch again. Well, if that happens all on the spur of the moment, you're going to get a hell of a lot of fight or flight. And you're seeing it. That pitch, race, There's a guy named John Lovitz who made an entire career from the 80s until now by one little joke. Yeah, when he would lie. That was his entire career. And this guy is doing it. He's squealing. His voice is raising.
Where? You're kidding me.
He feigns some shock, like, oh, I can't believe that. He never denies one thing. He never says, not me, that didn't happen. His respiration increases, his pitch shifts, his barriers increase, his blink rate is up, and he breaks eye contact to the right. He's not breaking eye contact to access information. He's breaking eye contact to get away as if he's running. There's no contempt for this in his face whatsoever. And to your point, Chase, I think anytime someone is fishing to see how much you know and not just saying, that didn't happen, that's easy. That person you should be paying attention to. Now, you'll also see, and you're going to find this through the video, his request for approval is brow up in that shrill voice as that thing happens. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so first of all, just no denial, just as you said there, Greg, right from moment one, you'd either go, well, that just didn't happen. There's no denial. And then, as you say, he starts fishing. It's quite comic, ultimately. It's hard not to laugh throughout of that. It's like a strange piece of, to me, amateur dramatics going on. And here's why. The way he goes fishing for information about what might be in this statement is he kind of uses the Chris Voss technique of interrogation, which is just to repeat an element of what's been said before. So there's this idea of, there's a handwritten statement. A statement? And then a little more said about it. I'd like to get hold of that statement. And because we get this repetition of things said, we actually get comedic dialogue. It's why it starts sounding like an episode of Seinfeld, because essentially, if you look at Seinfeld, all it does is to take something that somebody just said before and repeat it with a slightly different intonation on it, which again is the Chris Voss way of interrogating somebody. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that. Probably a great interrogation technique or informational technique, great way to create comedy. But that put together with these two, performers in this strange piece of amateur dramatics, it feels like they've had a number of takes at this one to an extent, maybe not, but very odd. What most comes to mind for me is the tone change on where it took place. There's a whole different tone. The comedic level disappears, and now there's a deep tone there.
Send me a copy of that statement. I'm dying to see that. He didn't indicate where this great love affair took place.
My guess is that there's a worry that if it took place in a certain area, a certain location, there may be evidence around that, and he wants to know, has he said where this took place? Because if it takes place in a certain place, I'm going to have to really create a good story around this one to get out of it. That's what I got around that.
Hey,
Scott,
let me add one thing back to you, Mark, before you hand it to Scott. One of the things that I should have mentioned, he is keenly aware of the camera here, whereas in other parts of this, he's telling a story and he doesn't have that. When you're confronted with something, whether it's a first time or not, and you're keenly aware of the camera, that can raise fight or flight in its own way. So that's something for us to pay attention to as well as we go through this whole thing. So sorry, and I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, Greg, is extra face. It's a term I coined when you see extras in movies and TV shows, they're sitting around like this. Eyebrows up and just act like nothing's going on. And when they talk, their illustrators are really, really big, and they're told not to make any noise as they talk. So it's really big. If you'll watch the Kardashians, everybody in that show who's not like one of the stars of the show, sitting around, whether they're in a restaurant or whether one of their friends on the couch, just going, and that's extra face, because you're being you're on film, you're being videoed at that point. So you're trying to put the best part of you forward, and that's the face they make. Now, when he hits this Mickey Mouse voice,
Where? You're kidding me.
that I agree with you, Chase. Unbelievable. That is I've never seen that before, never heard that before anywhere else to that level than here. But when he uses the explicative, what happens is his chin comes down as he's saying that, because he's starting to go, oh no, they know. And Mark, to your point, when he's thinking of the story he's got to make up, he needs more information. He doesn't know how, like Chase said, he doesn't know how much information they have up to this point, but he's wondering, which time is this guy talking about? Is he talking about all the times? Or is he talking about one single time? Because what he's in now is what Greg was talking about earlier. When he's trying to get, he's in defend. So what he's done in the liar's loop is he's already pitched. Pitching is where you actually tell the lie, but he's been triggered by him saying, here's this information. And as he gathers this information, he's thinking, I have to come up with something. And then he's deconflicting as he goes along, but he's got to know what he needs to deconflict before he starts giving anything out. That's why he's really not saying a whole lot other than I want to see that information. Not a whole lot of details about anything. He's backed off because he's thinking, I got to collect information. I got to get as much information. And Mark, what you're talking about is elicitation. Those are the techniques that Chris uses, that he's talking about in his book. So he's using elicitation. He doesn't realize he's doing it, but he's using elicitation techniques to get as much information as he possibly can. It's just a natural one. Obviously, he doesn't know, or he may know, but I don't think so at this point. So that's where he is. He's trying to get enough information so he'll know what to defend as he goes back in. All right, that's what I got. We good?
One thing,
Chase.
In this instance, in most crimes, probably 90%, I made that up, but let's just go with it. In most crimes, the person doesn't know how much you know. And especially as a police officer doing an interrogation, this video, when you watch this video back again, now think of how and why the bait question is so deadly effective. That question that starts with, is there any reason that X, Y, and Z would have seen you do this, or one of your neighbors would have reported this? That question is, in my opinion, one of the most, probably top 3 interrogation techniques in the world. The bait.
It separates senior interrogators from junior people who come in and blast out information that's not true and let you know they don't know anything to start with, right? It's the ask versus the tell. Yep.
I always add whatsoever. Is there any reason whatsoever? Because that takes it to the wall. Is there any possibility at all when you go through there? And then when you start talking about DNA, it'd be a reason that your DNA would be in that room.
Yeah.
And you say stuff like, like your hair, your eyelashes, some spit when you were talking, like you'd be able to find spit when they're talking. And those eyes will get all big and they'll start listening. So that's a potent tool there.
Well, you got his statement. Mm-hmm. What'd he say?
Said you had sex with him.
Oh, you're shitting me.
4 or 5 times.
Where?
I don't know all the details because I was skimming through all the stuff. And when I came to his...
You're kidding me.
Mm-mm. That's what he's claiming. That's what he's claiming.
Oh my God.
Everybody wants a piece of you.
Jesus Christ.
Or everybody claims to have a piece of you. One of the two.
And you have his statement?
Yeah, we copied it.
Send me a copy of that statement. I'm dying to see that.
I'll get it tomorrow.
Was it a short statement, a long statement?
About a page and a half.
Okay.
Handwritten.
Handwritten? Okay. He didn't indicate where this great love affair took place?
Yeah, but Mike, I cannot remember it. So. Rather know now than later.
I'll say. God, I'll say for sure.
So I talked to Dave about Dennis, and we're going to rethink. We're going to digest the statements and then rethink as to how to approach it.
Okay. All right. Jesus. All right.
Okay, we good?
Yep. Yeah.
Let's move.
Kathleen and I were in here watching a movie. I'd gone to Blockbusters and rented a video, and we were watching American Sweethearts. And I think it was probably around 11 o'clock that the movie ended, and we took our glasses, left the dinner plates, as a matter of fact, on there. We were cleaning up the next day. Went into the kitchen. We would talk for hours. Kathleen and I at nighttime would talk 2-3 hours, talk about the movie or the kids or what we were going to do. And we came in here. I think there was, I'm not sure, we probably had another bottle. I know we were drinking 2 bottles that night. It was a nice night. I guess it was 55, 60 degrees. Very nice night. And I'd gone outside.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I love it. I love this. So we start with, okay, let's start with this. Just leaving the dinner plates. So we left the dinner plates there. Does that look like a house where anybody leaves the dinner plates overnight? Okay, just go back and look. Does it look like a house where people go, just leave them until the morning. We've had a couple of bottles. Let's just leave them till the morning. Listen to the sound, okay? You can hear that sound echoing around hard surfaces, which means there's very little upholstery in this place. Okay, as he starts moving through, you get that lack of upholstery. You got a lack of upholstery. It means there's a lack of things to pick up dust. I think you got people here, living here, who don't like a mess. You can see it as you go into that house. No upholstery, everything spotlessly clean, flowers arranged, fresh, new flowers. Yes, I know people are filming, but ultimately you can see with that place, the types of surfaces they are need cleaning all of the time. This is, so from moment one, alarm bells go off for me because I go, that's not true. That's not true, but you need it to be true for some reason. For some reason, you've got to make out this whole progression of story whereby these were left because they wouldn't normally be left. And somebody's come in, I think, and gone, hang on, why are those not washed up? What happened here? Then there's some problem around the bottles of wine. I think we had 2 bottles of wine. Then there's some, mess up around there.
I think there was, I'm not sure. We probably had another bottle. I know we were drinking 2 bottles that night.
Here's what I reckon. I reckon there was 2 bottles of wine or more drunk. I reckon one of those people may well have drunk, more than half of that. Okay, so, but certainly they drank more than 2 bottles, I would think. So I think there's some protection here around stuff being different from how it normally is, and potentially some extra alcohol than usual being drunk at this time as well. That's all I've got around that one. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to come at this from a writer's perspective because I know you guys are going to clobber the heck out of the behavior stuff. I want you to notice the shift from past to past perfect. And what past perfect means is it's the difference between I pulled my car into the driveway and I had pulled my car into the driveway. So when you're reading most fiction books, they're written in past tense. John did this. John went through the door. But then when that past tense has to go into past tense again, it has to go into what's called past perfect. John thought back to the day he had been at the whatever, Burger King. That's past perfect. So what we have here is a past perfect statement. I had gone to Blockbusters. So we know he's one of the people who puts an S at the end of store names like Kroger's. We know he's one of those. Probably not relevant. Then back to past, we watched. Then it's back to a suggestive statement. We would talk for hours. Sit and talk. He didn't say they sat and talked. He did not ever say that they sat there and talked. He said we would do these things. So that's like if I said, Scott, what'd you do on Wednesday night after you left the office? And Scott said, well, I usually go straight home. That's not an answer. So this is what's called a suggestive statement. It did not answer anything, didn't explain what happened that night at all. It's talking about we would do these things. Then it goes back to past.
We probably had
when it says we had some wine, explained a few things in past tense, and then back to past perfect. Right as he's walking out that back door, listen close. He says, I had gone outside. And those are very interesting to note. Just when did it switch to perfect and when did it switch to regular past? And when things are not in full past or full past perfect, there's a big problem. But please keep in mind that one of our limitations watching this is we are unaware of how the questions were specifically posed to him and whether or not they were surgically crafted to yank some certain response out of him for the camera. So we, as far as I know, none of us know that. So we'll keep going around the circle. Greg?
Well, what's funny, Chase, is we're going down the same path. Very similar path. What I'm doing is looking for a baseline. This guy is a storyteller. What we're doing is getting his cadence here. Because he does tell stories and because he's written 5 books about war and Vietnam and Korea and those things, he talks a lot in past perfect. He talks a lot in past. I'm going to run down a list. We were watching. I had gone. We were watching until the movie ended. It's a permanent thing. We took glasses. We left dinner plates. We would talk We came, we were drinking. I think it's the way he talks, and we're going to see it throughout here. I think the way he talks is things that happen all the time would happen. Like the dogs would be here. Those kinds of things this is how things happen. Actions that he actually took, we were drinking. I think he uses then a noun instead of actually using the verb. And so I think we're seeing a pattern of a guy who is prepared, and he's talking not to the camera, but he's talking to the person carrying that camera as if he's telling a story. And this is a great opportunity for us to see something that is him kind of rattling along. Now, the interesting piece is listen to how much detail he gives. We talk about people who are small chunkers and big chunkers, time, event, or sequence people. If you ask me what I did yesterday, I went to the grocery store. That's an event. That's the way my brain works. Some people wake up and they'll tell you at 0500 I did this, 0530 I did that, 0700 I did this. Other people will give you a sequence. I got up, brushed my teeth, and some of them will go ad nauseum to the point you want to choke yourself to death listening to them talk. This guy's setting himself up as that guy. So that's going to matter, because now he's giving you the story as if he's writing about it in a column or as if he's writing a novel. That's all I'm doing here is baselining. Now he's set himself up, and those things that he said, those are telling me the way his brain works. And Chase, I'm with you. Words matter. In this case, the body language, not so much, because he's broadcasting what he wants you to hear. And he's not at all nervous about the camera because it isn't catching him in a kind of impromptu thing. Earlier, he was caught impromptu, and it was a third party. The camera was a third party. In this case, this guy's been a reporter. He's done a little bit of everything. He's been a columnist. He's done a little bit of everything. The camera is a person to him, and he's telling a story. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah. Well, you guys pretty much got everything I was going to cover to the point there. I'll just really quickly go through. I agree with you, Mark. The details he's given a whole lot of details there up front, especially in that room. You move along, the details get less and less. There may have been, I think we drank 2 bottles, that style of thing. But he's really relaxed where he is. Greg, you're right, because no extra face here. He's just talking to the one guy, or the one woman, whoever it is that's there. So he's more relaxed. He's on his own turf, and it's a great spot to get a baseline, especially verbally, from him, the way he constructs his sentences. His vernacular really hasn't changed much at all, because he structures he structures stories for a living, and that's what he's doing here. He's structuring something so it's really easy to understand. He's not taking a whole lot of time to think about it, which is very important as he goes through. He does stop a couple of times and pause, but he doesn't pause as often as for as long as we're going to see in a little while as we move forward here. But that's you guys pretty much nailed all that. So that's all I got.
Kathleen and I were in here watching a movie. I'd gone to Blockbusters and rented a video, and we were watching American Sweethearts. And I think it was probably around 11 o'clock that the movie ended. And we took our glasses, left the dinner plates, as a matter of fact, on there. We were cleaning up the next day. Went into the kitchen. We would talk for hours. Kathleen and I at nighttime would talk 2-3 hours, talk about the movie or the kids or what we were going to do. And we came in here. I think there was, I'm not sure, we probably had another bottle. I know we were drinking 2 bottles that night. It was a nice night. I guess it was 55, 60 degrees. Very nice night. And I'd gone outside.
All right, let's move along.
And we were talking here for a fair amount of time. And then what we would usually do on a nice night, we would go down to the pool, which I always, think is about the nicest place on the property. I don't know if the chairs were like this or not, but I mean, they're probably something like this. And we were both right here. And the dogs would come over, and we were just talking and finishing our drinks. And then she said, I gotta go in because I've got the conference call in the morning. And she started walking out that way. And I stayed right here. Don't think anything special to her. Certainly not thinking this is the last time I'm going to see her. I said goodnight. I'll be up a little bit later. and stayed here, and she walked. And the last I saw her was when I was there, and she was just walking here. That's it. That was the last I saw Kathleen alive. No, she was alive when I found her, but barely.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I'll try not to steal everybody's thunder here, but we just saw baseline. Now, that was bad because he steps right out the door and right into a bear pit. What he does is when he walks through the door, now he's been meticulous with his details, and she suddenly appears. He doesn't say she came out. He simply says, and
we were talking here.
So he skipped over some time. There might have been something happened, Mark, to your point about why the dishes were left. Something happened. And he then says, we were talking for some time. There's a pause, not in his baseline. So there's a gap for a fair amount of time. Now, my interrogator brain would immediately go, about what? About what? Because something's hot that's happening right here. First time I watched this video, I was like, ding, 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 we got a problem on the deck. Something's going on. And then he says something, and this word could mean that it never happened. And in my initial pause, I thought it never happened, but now I changed my opinion. What we would usually do on a nice night, he says, and what we call usually is like honestly or any other thing, a push-pull word. Why usually? Why not just tell me what you did instead of what you usually would do? And then he goes back to describing the pool as being the nicest area, and he goes back to his normal baseline, lots of details, walking. Then he goes back into storytelling mode. He goes over, we were here, the dogs would have come over here, so that dogs always do this thing, and it's a repeatable pattern for him. Then he says, we were just talking and finishing our drinks, pregnant words. Look, words of omission, as Joe Navarro and Jack Schaefer call it, verbal bridging, or I call it time hiding. And then, lip compression, jaw works, and then he says, she says, I got to go in because I got to make a call in the morning. But he doesn't say it like he usually does. He does a lilt at the end, as if he's asking for approval. There's a total lack of eye contact during this time. Might mean nothing, might mean something. It's simply him moving around. And then he says, and that's the last time I saw her alive.
No, she was alive when I found her, but barely.
So lots of inconsistency with his storytelling brain going on here. He's a small chunker. He's giving you lots of details. His word patterns bothered me the first time I listened to it until I went back through and figured out he's a guy who says would have been for something that happens all the time. When it's something active, it is usually using a verbal noun like drinking, when it's, or talking. When it's something that is iffy, then he's actually using a verb and a past tense verb. So lots of word patterns, lots of things going on. That lip compression, the verbal bridging around the topic made me really red flag. If I were sitting there, I'd be all over him. Chase, what do you got?
Great points. I think when he was inside the house, I'm not sure, and we all disagree sometimes. I'm not sure we're seeing baseline. I think we're seeing storytelling at a masterful level that is potentially untrue. And I'm hesitant to call that baseline, but I think that some of these are the ways that he normally speaks. But we're back to vague answers when he says usually. And I think the word usually is a way that he softens details. And I think just seeing the dogs reminded him, because he looked at the dog a quarter of a second before he said, and the dogs would come over. And he actually says, and listen closely when you go back to this video, we would just talking.
We were just talking?
We would just talking. He didn't say we were just talking. He says we would just talking.
We were just talking?
So he even accidentally added that in there. And his eyes are no longer matching reference. When he is on message, when he knows what he's talking about and he's confident, his eyes and hands move in perfect synchronicity, as most of ours do. But now, in this part of the story, his eyes are no longer matching up with what he's talking about, where she exited, where the dogs were, where the chairs were. His eyes are not moving where they were. The last I saw Kathleen, he says this, his body's open. He's holding a leash in one hand, his other hand's out there. As Mark would say, his hands are down in the truth plane. They're opened up. And his realization of his mistake causes an instantaneous chin drop, then a pointing. And he says, no, she was alive when I found her, which is sudden closure. His hands pull all the way in and close in front of his soft belly, which I'm sure Mark will expand on. I hope Mark expands on it because he says it more eloquently than I do. But at the end, when he's talking about how these details get mixed up so easily, he's talking about all these details, but that's not a big deal. And he's saying that it's easy to mix these things up, and people tend to do that back and forth mixing gesture, like a laundry machine gesture. When they want to communicate, that's easily misunderstood by anybody. And some people do this habitually, like even some famous public speakers like Brian Tracy. But this guy does not have it in his baseline. It's not there. So I think we're seeing deception here. Not that he's guilty of the crime, but that he is making up a majority of the story here. Scott?
I didn't think he went to the pool till I heard Greg talking about that. I thought when he said we would have gone down to the pool, I was under the impression they didn't go down to the pool. From that point, I don't think they got outside. I think whatever might have started there in the TV room when they're watching TV. And then she was going upstairs and he caught her there, and whatever happened to her happened right then. And he's just making that other stuff up because he's going through, he's very relaxed, he's on his own turf, because he says when he's out, we would have. So my impression was, before Greg went through all that and before you were talking about that, Chase, was he didn't even make it down to the pool. I think he tagged her before they got down there. But then thinking about, you're right, the way he's constructing those sentences, that makes me think maybe he was down there as well, because he does try to back up and save himself when he says, no, wait, I saw her again, well, alive, but not so much, or whatever the term was there. So yeah, you guys totally nailed all I got in there, and I'll leave it at that. So,
well, and the only thing, Chase, I think when we talk about baseline, when we say baseline, I'm saying his storytelling baseline, because we don't know what his personality is. We just know what we're seeing on video, right? That's
good point. And Scott, I think what you said is 100% plausible. It's definitely
for sure.
Definitely
I thought the same
inside
thing
of what's going on.
I totally think I'm the same. I don't think they went outside and down to the pool at all. And here's why. I think, Chase, you're right. He's looking around that environment and he's picking up cues and he's putting them into the story. He does it when he sees the cushions are not quite straight. That's kind of interesting, is it? Because he isn't used to soft furnishings around the place. And when stuff is out of place, like, that triggers him. So he's like, oh, those could have been like this, or they could have been a bit more like this, or the dogs came down. He's making this one up on the fly, I think. And part of that, I think, and also, Scott, he's leading everybody away from the crime. That's what he's doing. He's like, should we have a look outside? Should we have a look down at the pool? And I'll start making up a story about how we went down there. He's leading everybody off on a whole different story. Let's just have a look at all the fillers in there. And Greg, you're often talking about this hiding time thing. And, and if somebody said, I'd be on that, I'd be, up in their grill. Well, on this guy, you would literally be fixed to his grill like some piece of roadkill. You would be through the grill on this guy, because here's what happens. And then, and then, and I stayed right here, and I stayed, and she left, and the last, and she, and that's it. It's full of filler. He's making stuff up as he goes along. It's extraordinary. Just go back, watch that again, and just see how much filler is there and how much he's using us to lead us literally down the garden path, if that is a metaphor that works for the US audience that we have. Certainly any of the UK audience will understand being led down the garden path. He's literally taking us to the bottom of the garden on this one. Chase, to your point of just explaining a bit of evolutionary behavioral psychology 101, or certainly my 101 to people, when you see people protect this belly area, we are descendant from ground-dwelling mammals, not apes up in trees. That was just something that the Victorians did to Charles Darwin to really annoy him. So he'd go, will you read the book? So we're descended from ground-dwelling mammals. As the plains of southern Africa opened up, as climate change happened back then and the forests of Africa receded, the ground-dwelling mammal now has an advantage to standing upright, and you get upright hominids. When the hominid goes upright on a plane, it's now got an advantage because it can see a distance up to several miles, be able to see prey or mate or a predator coming. But now you're upright. There's a disadvantage in that this area of the body is now very, very vulnerable. We do not evolve ribs all the way down because we want to be able to duck and run and be able to run long distance. So this remains vulnerable. And therefore, often when we're truly telling the truth, we will open up in this area. Or if you want to convince somebody that you're being honest, you can open up in that area, and it will convince most people, including yourself. There's a whole difference that happens in your brainstem with various neurotransmitters and levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide changing as you open up here. So as you open up here, it feels more honest. As you close around this area, you feel more protected. There, little evolutionary behavioral psychology 101. There you go.
Excellent.
And we were talking here for a fair amount of time. And then what we would usually do on a nice night, we would go down to the pool, which I always, think is about the nicest place on the property. I don't know if the chairs were like this or not, but I mean, they're probably something like this. And we were both right here. And the dogs would come over, and we were just talking and finishing our drinks. And then she said, I gotta go in because I've got the conference call in the morning. And she started walking out that way. And I stayed right here. Don't think I think anything special to her, certainly not thinking this is the last time I'm going to see her. I said goodnight, I'll be up a little bit later. And stayed here, and she walked. And the last I saw her was when I was there, and she was just walking here. That's it. That was the last I saw Kathleen alive. No. She was alive when I found her, but barely.
All right, here we go.
I can vividly remember finding Kathleen. I can remember opening the door. I can remember calling 911. I particularly remember Todd just holding me as tight as possible, I think, to contain me. And I can remember Heather, the doctor, Ben's girlfriend, taking my pulse. And then I can remember, and it must have been very early while I was still in the kitchen, that a cop was on me instantly. Everywhere I went, a policeman was there. I went outside and with Ben, and a policeman was there. And I remember walking down there, and a policeman was there. There was always a policeman with me.
Do you have a pet owl?
Yeah, no kidding. Nobody asking that.
Where's the owl?
All right, I'll go first on this one. I think what we're seeing here is this. What he's talking about is the protocol that police officers follow when they show up to a scene like this. You got somebody that's been they're a mess when you show up. You're gonna start walking around with and following the person that was there, that made the call, that was on the scene, and whoever they're talking to. You want somebody to listen to what they're saying. You want to make sure they're not saying, okay, they think this, so we got to move our chess piece over to here. As they may need stuff to create that story to help defend them. So what he's talking about is trying to show that the police are biased and think from the word go that he's the guy who did it. However, that's what they do anyway. They're going to do that. We have a whole module on this at the True Crime Workshop. about the protocol police use when you have the first interaction with the police when they show up. The police are the police officers that show up on the first responders are not the detectives. They show up later. This guy's under the impression that everybody's the same thing, from the 911 dispatcher to the officers he's dealing with when they first show up, then when the detectives show up. But that's not the same thing by any means. So all they're doing is keeping an eye on this guy and listening to what he's saying. It's nothing they're doing because they think they should. That's what you do. That's the protocol you follow when you show up to something like that. So he's trying to skew the viewers into thinking, well, they're all against me anyway. He does this with the DA in a little while as well. But that's what that's about. He's trying to say from the word go, they've been against me. All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to leave this very simply. I'm going to talk about where emotion should be and where emotion is. So we think of two things, like Chase, you and I agree on this. It's withholding information, but most of the time I think it's withholding emotional information, lip compressions. So he's talking about his dead wife. He's talking about a 911 call. He's talking about walk, 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 walk. Where do you think that emotion should land? Dead wife? Probably. That's a good place for it. No. Eye accessing up left. I'm remembering something visual. I'm remembering something that happened. And maybe that's his, not his normal, but it's digital memory or it's visual memory. He's go left, he'll go up left. When you're thinking of something emotional, your eyes drift down to the right. When I turn my head that way, you automatically recognize it. Mark, a good actor does that, a bad actor doesn't. So we expect to see that when his wife has died, but we see it when the police are following him. We see lip compressions when he's talking about the 911 call and when he's talking about the police following him. He's emotional about that, but I sure don't see any emotion around the wife. That's a red flag for me, and I would probe and poke and try to understand why. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so actually to that point, Greg, when he starts his words of "I vividly remember," he's down. I'm not going to try and explain to which side because I won't be able to do it. But he's down. As he starts to recall vividly, his eye line changes completely. Yeah. So I instantly go, well, there's something going on there, because he started to recall and then he changed his recall. So does he not like what's down there? Does he need to make this up? I mean, there's a stark difference. Give me some feedback on that, Greg.
Yeah. So for a second, think about what you should say in any situation. Okay, you're in trouble. You just have been busted for X. Your eyes are going to drift down because you're doing internal conversation about what answer you should give. And then maybe he did go to a vivid recall. For example, think about directions from your house to the first fast food or Starbucks near you can find, and think about landmarks as you're walking along the way. Your eyes drift up and to your left, 90% of us. And we have to find baseline for the individual. But my guess is, Mark, he's starting off with an internal conversation and then boom, going up and accessing. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thanks for
that. Where did I got to? Hang on. Oh yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, great.
That's
great
all right.
Pro.
That's all right. That's all right. Yes. So what happens now for me is basic storytelling that he's doing in order to, as you say, Scott, bias us around this. And the story is that he particularly remembers needing to be cared for and supported by his, I think probably his son, I'm assuming. And then there's a daughter-in-law who he clearly explains it has a medical practice of some sort and needs to take his pulse. So it's not just any old person going, oh, do you need your pulse changing? It's an actual doctor going, oh, I got to take somebody's pulse here. And an actual son going, you really need, a big cuddle and some support and to be contained as well. And I love that idea that he was probably, close to, renting his clothing in a biblical way at the horror of what is the accident that has happened to his wife down the flight of stairs, as I'm slowly learning as we go through this show together. And the police are harassing him, and it's partly that contrast as well, because I think, to your point, Scott, if the police were just following him around, in the story, we might go, oh, fair though. Maybe they need to, check if you're okay. But because he's set up, no, if I'm in trouble, if I need help, you got to hold me, you got to contain me, and you better check my pulse. And those guys weren't doing that. So they clearly weren't doing what was necessary for me. So he creates quite a lovely contrast there in his story. Chase, what do you got?
All right, I'm going to break this down systematically. Let's talk first about the vividly remember statements. He only says that he vividly remembers in the description of contended parts of the story.
I can vividly remember finding Kathleen.
That's it. That's the only time he says vividly. The word vividly disappears when he recalls things that are provable by other people. His expressiveness, so the demeanor and expressiveness is completely absent until he arrives at the first provable and truthful part of the story. And once he arrives at provable, truthful things, he shows strong body narration. His head movement, eye movement are linked up. His illustrators, as you guys would call them, are great throughout all these truthful events. Now to his eyes, there's a grimace expression when he says finding Kathleen. Props to him for mentioning her name. But the grimace is confirmed if you watch it in slow motion. Just look at the lower eyelid for this. But during all questionable points of the story, every single one are preceded by a double blink eye flutter. So 2 blinks, none of the truthful ones. None of the ones that other people can prove that actually happened have this double blink eye flutter as a precursor to the statement. So truthful recall is normal. His resting blink rate, except for the who he went outside with, is the only thing that's different. So maybe he's having trouble recalling who went outside with him. Not sure what that is, but that is an interesting data point there. But let's talk about detail really quick. Not a single detail about the body, the scene, or any of the disputed parts of the story. 0. And there's a massive amount of detail with the truthful parts, provable parts of the story that other people can prove. This is a textbook illustration of a deceptive statement.
I can vividly remember finding Kathleen. I can remember opening the door. I can remember calling 911. I particularly remember Todd just holding me as tight as possible, I think, to contain me. And I can remember Heather, the doctor, Ben's girlfriend, taking my pulse. And then I can remember, and it must have been very early while I was still in the kitchen, that a cop was on me instantly. Everywhere I went, a policeman was there. I went outside and with Ben, and a policeman was there. And I remember walking down there, and a policeman was there. There was always a policeman with me.
Cool. Let's move along.
Tight, guys. Nice.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, you're under oath, correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you,
Yes.
treat you as an honest person.
Yes.
But the truth is, there have been times in your life where you have lied because it benefited you.
I would say probably that's a good characterization, although I might say it's easier. It was just easier sometimes to let the lie come out.
All right, I'll go first on this one because I don't have a whole lot for it. There's tons there, but I know you guys are going to rip at a new one. So what I want to talk about is, remember that show Lie to Me? The one that was supposed to be Paul Ekman in that show? There's a song in there, and it was called Easier to Lie. And it's by his band Aqualung. Go check it out. The song is about what he's talking about. It's an experience we've all experienced. We've all gone through the feeling that guy's talking about when we've lied about something, and we've all lied. You've lied. Every panelist has lied. We've all lied. And some people are good at it and some people aren't. So he's talking about the feeling that is expressed in that song, where it's easier to lie than to say, okay, well, here's what happened. Let's get started and go through the whole thing, because would disrupt his life. It would disrupt his marriage. It would disrupt everything if he had told the truth about that, the lies he's talking about. So in a nutshell, that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, I mean, because it is easier to lie. We all know that. And that's the reason we lie a lot of times. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I started looking at this and I was just, what is going on here? It's just the most bizarre amateur dramatics going on. And then I said to the guys, I said, what is going on? And they said, oh, I think they're kind of practicing for jury. And then it started to make a bit more sense to me. You know, it was court prep. But even still, I mean, so he starts off with fingertips like so. Now, you only ever do this consciously. The moment you see any human being like this, you know they know they're doing this, because this is super hard to do, and that's why, like, it takes a lot of conscious brain power to do this. So the moment you see somebody doing this, you're like, you know, you're performing right now. You know what you're doing. You think this has an effect. So he started with this effect, and I guess you know, his coaches, which I don't know who they are, but his coaches have said, you know, do this because you'll look, you know, like you got some power, and you know, you'll look like you're honest if you do that. So we know this is amateur dramatics from moment one from him. Okay, the second question came up, which is, who's the dude in the who's blowing his nose into a paper bag?
Correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you?
Like, is that, you know, the jury is one man strong and true, and who selected that guy?
Correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you?
So it's like, we got this jury member and he's blowing his nose into a paper bag. That was just odd. I don't know what any of that is about, and why he's part of the team.
Correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you?
Why? Oh, let's get him in. You know, he blows he's got a nasal problem, but let's get him in. He'll be really helpful. I don't know what's going on there. And then the guy who's I guess is his lawyer, not even playing a lawyer. I guess the guy's his lawyer, I suppose. I don't know. He opens with what we call a Barnum statement, which is, it's always true. It's true for anybody. So, you know, you've lied to serve, you know, your own purposes. Well, yeah, of course. You know, lies either serve the purpose of the person lying or serve the greater community or somebody else. That's the nature of lies. They set up something that isn't true in order to serve a benefit, either for you or somebody else or a whole group of people. And do we do that? Have you ever done that? It's like, yes, of course I have. Of course I've done that. I probably do that most every day. So to throw out a Barnum statement, the moment you hear questions like that, we call them Barnum statements. They're always true. Just like I know that you sitting there right now, you have a scar just on your knee. Yeah, just around that knee, probably the other way. If not, it's your elbow. Yeah, and we know that's a Barnum statement. Like, everybody has a scar somewhere on their knees and their elbow, because they're designed. They're designed for you to fall over and for them to get damaged and to heal. Okay, so Barnum statements going on there. That's nuts. What is going on there? I want to hear from everybody else. Chase, what's going on there?
Speaking of Barnum statements, one of the best was, some of your aspirations tend to be unrealistic. Oh, really? That was the beginning of the original Barnum statement paragraph. Right. And they're great, but they're also great when you say it to a jury as a witness. But the statement you see from this attorney is a very standard issue, law school. Here's how you cross-examine. Here's how you undermine someone's level of trust with the jury. Super standard, not very effective. And keep this in mind, it's not a question. It is not a question. But this is a golden opportunity for this person to answer it, which is where some attorneys would say, if it's not a question, you say the phrase, that's not a question. Is that a question? To try to undermine the opposing counsel, not a good idea at this point. It's always a good idea to undermine opposing counsel, but not at points like this. So what you need to do, if I'm coaching an attorney, if there's a jury there, the first response needs to be to teach your client universal experiences. Universal experiences, something everyone can identify with. And maybe he could answer a question with something like, I think every human being, and subtly, I'm pointing to myself here. I would teach this witness. Every human being, I'm pointing to myself, has regretted lying before. We've all done it, and I most certainly regret allowing that behavior to be okay. And when I said allowing that behavior to be okay, when I said that behavior, that's a dissociative word that I'm really not distancing myself from it. I'm helping them to visualize it as separate from me. So when I say we, and I'm grouping everyone in, and then I'm talking about something everyone sitting in that jury box has done, lied to benefit themselves. When your wife says, do I look great in this dress? And you say yes, even though it might not be true, that's a lie to benefit yourself. And it's also the reason we function as a society. So yeah, we've all done it. Greg?
Yeah, so number one, a lot of people do it instinctively after a while because they've done it so many times. Mark, when you intentionally are trying to block yes, I always encourage any executive, you, any person who has a job, you, any person who wants to get ahead, you, not to ever do this because it's perceived badly in the beginning. For just a minute, think about where you've seen it. Burns on The Simpsons. Excellent. It looks evil. It looks like, masterminding evil. And what happens is as you compromise, your hands rotate forward. So it is a really good indicator that you've lost control. And then when you're finally compromised, they're like this. I have a great photo of Tony Blair standing in front of Condoleezza Rice just like that. And I was like, call Mark, call Mark, call Mark. You need some help. So we tell people not to do steepling. Steepling's a bad move. And when you move forward to compromise, the reason people do it is because it looks like they're compromised. In this case, not sure if the guy coached him to do it or not, but his messaging for the first time is pretty congruent. Whether he's telling the truth or whatever, he's trying to do kind of a mea culpa and be contrite. And his body language is pretty good here. This is a pretty good baseline because now his eyes are moving at the right time. He looks softened. He looks emotional. Looks like, hey, yeah, I made a mistake. And it does come across that way. Now, whether somebody coached him or that's him actually doing it, I think it's actually he feels safe enough to say those words in preparation. And what he's going through right here is inoculation. Just like you're inoculated where all of us are getting this shot against a virus, or like SEER school where we put you through the experience so you're ready for it. This is what you do. This is what trial preparation is. We get the guy ready so that he is not surprised when that question comes across. And I think what you're seeing here is a pretty solid baseline for when he is contrite and doing what he's supposed to do. Now the fingers, give or take, who knows? But I think if you take this and you take the last segment, so this video is video 9, the last video is video 8. If you go all the way back to video 4, the one where he talks about being on the deck and going down to the pool, and you look at this as a baseline for, yeah, he's being contrite and honest, and the last videos where he's asking for approval constantly, go back and take apart video 4 now. Go back and look at that story. And put down the notes what you see, because I think you'll see a very different story now.
And if you want to watch somebody do this, go from steepling like this and talking like they know everything, slowly but surely going down this way. If you go to bodylanguagetactics.com, we've got a video there where we're talking about our course. And the more Greg alphas me, the more this thing starts going down. If you begin at the first, I'm like, oh, I'm a totally in charge guy. And by the time it's over, I'm like totally down like this. Watch that. That's hilarious. And people pointed out to me, like, dude, what's going on with your thing?
It's funny.
Like, well,
that was years ago.
Alpha. Yeah, I know. But still, it's still classic for me anyway. But that's a perfect example of that.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, you're under oath, correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you,
Yes.
treat you as an honest person.
Yes.
But the truth is, there have been times in your life where you have lied because it benefited you.
I would say probably that's a good characterization, although I might say it's easier. It was just easier sometimes to let the lie come out.
Okay, well, now we've been through this one. So let's throw it around the room and give a little wrap up of what we got on this, what we think about it. Really quickly, 15, 20 seconds. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I think there's some good training in this one generally for if you're in court and somebody in the jury decides to blow their nose into a paper bag. I think, good preparation for that kind of situation. I'm stunned by, that walk along the garden path there. And I think ultimately that's what he's doing. He is leading us on a story here which is not accurate at all.
I think the whole thing, we are seeing a person that has a narrative to push and a story. And I think most of this, I think most of this was deceptive. I don't know anything about the evidence. I don't know anything about the case. I haven't seen the Netflix series. I'd never heard this guy's name until Scott texted me today and said, hey, the videos are in the Dropbox. That was it. But I think you don't need that to see behavior. And there's a lot of academic-based, very, very research-based stuff that we're relying on here that is not conjecture, that does show that there's a high degree of deception going on throughout this entire thing. And I think he can pull people in. That's his talent. You can even see, if you go back and watch that last video we just looked at, that juror was nodding his head. He was nodding his head along with him. And you can see that little nod as he's starting to admit, like, I have some faults, and we all do. It's great. I think he did a great job. Scott?
Yeah, I think as we go through this, it's some of these things I'm actually going to pull out and use in training, because there's some classic things where somebody looks like they should be looking, and it can just buzz right by if you're not paying attention. We're set up to be paying attention to them, but if you're not set up to pay attention to these specific things, it'll run right by you. So there's a lot of things in here I'm going to grab, or 2 or 3 things that I'm going to grab and use for training, because they're wonderful, especially that story going from the TV room all the way down to the pool, everything that happens in there. You could do a day on that, probably, just tearing that thing apart. Okay, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so guys, the first time somebody asked me to review this, there's a British comedy duo, Elf and Leafy, and I did their podcast, and they asked me to do this, and I watched the first few minutes, the thing that's video for, and I just said, no, nobody believes that. That was how bad it was for me without analyzing. I just said, okay, look at all the deviations from baseline that happen right there. So for me, when I see that much deviation, now I'd have to watch the whole thing and get a lot more evidence. And Chase, you famously say we're not the forensics panel. We're looking at repeatable symptoms and behavioral symptoms and body language to see what we see. This guy's deceptive. Now, what he's deceptive about, I don't know. Go watch the video, see all the horrendous evidence and all that. All these things spin their own tail, but this guy's not telling the truth. I don't trust it.
All right, there's another one in the can, fellas. See you next time.
Thanks.
Correct?
Yes.
And you expect this jury to believe you.
Fabricated, no,